In 1948, Berlin was starving, surrounded by Soviet-controlled territory, cut off from food, fuel, and electricity. No tanks rolled in, no bombs were dropped. Instead, the Cold War's first major battle was fought in the sky. This is the story of the Berlin Airlift. After World War II, Germany was carved up into zones of occupation. But Berlin, the former Nazi capital, was a special case. Deep inside the Soviet-controlled part of Germany, it too was divided. You had American, British, and French sectors in the west, and a Soviet sector in the east. At first, there was a fragile attempt at cooperation. The former allies tried to run the city together. But that trust collapsed, and it collapsed fast. The ideologies were just too different. By 1948, these simmering tensions were about to explode. The West introduced a new currency in their sectors to help rebuild the German economy, a move the Soviets saw as a direct provocation. Berlin was about to become ground zero for a new kind of conflict. In June of 1948, Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union made their move. It was as all roads leading into West Berlin were blocked. The railways were shut down. The canals, which were vital for transporting heavy goods like coal, were closed. Then, the electricity was cut. Suddenly, 2 million civilians in West Berlin were trapped, held hostage in their own city. The Soviet goal was brutally simple: starve the Western powers out, force them to abandon their foothold in Berlin, handing a massive political victory to the Soviets. The people of West Berlin were left with dwindling supplies, facing a cold, dark, and hungry future. For the Western Allies, it was a test of will. Would they back down? Would they surrender the city? The Western Allies faced a terrible choice. Option 1. Use their military might to force a convoy through the blockade. This meant tanks smashing through Soviet roadblocks, a direct confrontation that could easily escalate into a full-blown war. World War III. Just a few years after the end of the Second, the world held its breath. Option 2. Surrender. Abandon the 2 million people of West Berlin to Soviet control. This would be a catastrophic blow to Western prestige and a clear sign that they could stand up to Soviet aggression. But General Lucius Clay, the American commander in Germany, and his British counterparts refused to back down. They came up with a third option, something so audacious, so radical it had never been attempted on this scale before. They would supply an entire city by air. It was codenamed Operation Vittles by the Americans and Operation Plainfare by the British. The plan was simple in concept, but staggeringly complex in execution. A constant stream of cargo planes, flying from bases in West Germany into the 3 airports in West Berlin. It started almost immediately. C-47s and C-54s, the workhorses of the airlift, began landing non-stop. Every few minutes, another plane would touch down, day and night, through thick fog, blinding snow, and pouring rain. They carried everything the city needed to survive: flour, milk, potatoes, coal to power the city and heat homes, medicine for the sick. The pilots were pushed to their absolute limits, flying multiple sorties a day in treacherous conditions. There was no room for error. A mistake didn't just mean a delay. It could mean a fiery crash. The survival of Berlin depended entirely on the flawless, relentless precision of this aerial ballet. Amidst the constant drone of engines and the desperate struggle for survival, a small act of kindness captured the world's imagination. An American pilot named Gail Halvorsen noticed children watching the planes land at Tempelhof Airport. On an impulse, he promised them he'd drop candy on his next flight. He tied handkerchiefs to chocolate bars to make tiny parachutes and wiggled his plane's wings as a signal before dropping his sweet cargo. The kids called him the Rosenbomber or Raisin Bomber. Word spread like wildfire. Soon, other pilots joined in. Back in America, people started donating candy and handkerchiefs. This simple gesture, known as Operation Little Vittles, became a powerful symbol. To the people of Berlin, especially the children, these planes weren't just delivering food and coal. They were delivering hope. They were a sign that the outside world had not forgotten them. The airlift continued for almost a year. The Soviets had expected the West to give up in a matter of weeks. They underestimated their opponent's resolve and logistical genius. The airlift became more and more efficient. At its peak, a plane was landing in Berlin every 30 seconds. Over 2.3 million tons of supplies were delivered in total. The people of West Berlin, despite the hardship, refused to yield. They worked on the ground, unloading planes and repairing runways, becoming partners in their own salvation. By the spring of 1949, the truth was undeniable. The blockade had failed. It was a massive public relations disaster for the Soviet Union, painting them as cruel bullies while the West was seen as heroic saviors. Finally, on May 12, 1949, the Soviets quietly lifted the blockade. The roads and railways were opened. The first battle of the Cold War had been won, and not a single shot was fired between the superpowers. So why does the Berlin Airlift matter so much? It was more than just a logistical miracle. It proved something profound, that determination and moral resolve could defeat brute force. It showed that a new kind of war could be fought and won without bullets or bombs. The airlift solidified the alliance between the Western powers and, crucially, It transformed the relationship between the Germans and their former enemies. The Americans, British, and French were no longer just occupiers. They were protectors. The airlift drew the first clear, uncrossable line in the ideological sand of the Cold War. It set the stage for the creation of NATO and the division of Germany into East and West. The conflict wouldn't be decided by who fired the first shot, but by who could endure the longest, who could win the hearts and minds of the world. The skies over Berlin in 1948 proved that. If you want more incredible true stories from the Cold War and World War II, make sure to subscribe to our channel. History didn't end in 1945, it just changed shape. Thanks for watching.